In this Photoshop quick fix, we are going to revisit the retouching tools that we have available to us, and we're going to use the picture that we used in the training videos and really go from beginning to end. And to start off with, I'm going to use the spot healing brush, and I'm going to zoom in. And really, the secret to uh, getting an end result that you're happy with comes down to just spending the time to do the work. The tools are extremely powerful, and so you can save a huge amount of time just by choosing the right tool, working with the size, and you can actually work fairly quickly. So let's get on with it. I'm just going to start painting where these cracks are, and you'll notice that the brush does a pretty good job at filling in these cracks and making it look realistic. Sometimes you have to revisit certain areas just to get a really good transition. And I've also found that sometimes you can get better results by not going too big with the brush because it's affecting a larger area. So if we go down to, say, a 16 pixel brush, and we'll get to that big mess area there in just a minute, but we can come down through here, get some of these cracks in here. We have age spots in there. And the only brush that we're using right now is the spot healing tool. And let's focus on his head here for a minute. And if you get some areas that are stubborn, like right near his head here, we can switch over to the clone brush and just turn the size down. Let's take a sample from an area nearby there and then just clone that area in. So a couple ways that you can handle that. But typically you're primarily going to use the clone brush and the healing brush. Those two will enable you to take care of probably 90% of the retouching problems that you're going to run into working with old photographs. So let's go over here to her dress. Another thing that I'll tell you is that right now, some of these age marks are really outstanding because they're in the photograph and they're a different tone than what we see here. And by converting the photograph into a grayscale image or into a duotone or something like that, it'll really remove most of that staining. So we could use that approach as well. Just get that area right here. So I think you'll agree this is pretty powerful from the way of tools. And I realize that I'm just working a little bit random here. But part of that reason is just to show you that it doesn't have to take a huge amount of time or be super complicated. You also notice that when I'm using the healing brush, I'm focusing just on certain areas. I'm not taking on too big of a swatch. And obviously, if you have a lot of patterns in certain areas of the photograph, you're going to perhaps need to do a little extra work in pattern matching. Fortunately, the pattern here is random enough that I really don't have to spend a huge amount of time worrying about that. So we just come through here, and then we have this area here. I'm just gonna get that big splotch there. Normally I would probably work a little bit slower. Now see, you can see here I'm running into another area of issue, so I'm gonna use the history brush, or not the history brush, but the history, and go back and kind of creep up on that area a little bit. And end up doing the same thing there. One more. Okay. So you see, whenever you get close to contrast between dark and light, you want to really be careful. Get rid of that spot there. And by the way, just for grins and giggles, these are actually my great-grandparents. Or my great-great-grandparents, I guess, actually. Okay, so believe it or not, we're actually almost done, except for the large area, and I'm saving the fun stuff there for last. It's actually not going to be that difficult to fix. But you can see our image is kind of coming together very nicely. Just kind of take out those scratches there. Get these here on his pants. Not really happy with this area here. That's better. Sometimes you have to go over an area more than once just to make sure that the detail is really captured the way you want. Okay, so let's start working on this big damage area. And you notice it really, the program isn't having much of an issue just retouching that. Another thing to keep in mind is that, you know, you don't have to be 100% perfect with this. I mean, who's going to judge it against the original picture in most cases? Even if you're working with clients, just the fact that it's going to look worlds better compared to the original, you know, will go a long way. So having said that, you know, you can crop it slightly or just add in certain areas if you need to. And this is a pretty big issue right here. And I'm going to show you, we're actually going to handle this big scratch here in a slightly different way with a different tool. But I want to repair these upper areas here first. Get some of these cracks out of here. And just come up along here. It did a pretty good job with that, didn't it? Okay, so the next thing we're going to use is to get this larger area. We could spend time and try to color it all in with the spot healing brush, but we're actually going to use the patch tool. And so I'm just going to draw around this like so. And then we're going to drag it over this way, because we want to line it up. And pay attention to the lines. You notice how certain lines make a difference. And I'm going to release and deselect, and it's gone. So now I can use the Spa Healing brush to go back to some of the areas where the duplication seems obvious and remove those areas to clean it up a little bit more, so that there's some differentiation there, so that it doesn't look like we just cloned the thing, even though we did. Okay. Now, there's a few things that you can't replace very easily, and that is like the grain of the photo. We could do some smoothing to smooth out her face a little bit. The blur tool could come in handy for that. Probably not that big. So we could use the blur tool to smooth out just her face itself, being careful to preserve any detail edges or anything like that. We could do the same with her arms. Another thing that we could experiment with, and I'm not quite sure how it would turn out here, is, but let's just take a look for curiosity's sake, is to use Smart Blur. Set the high quality and a low threshold so that it would average out just certain areas, but maintain a level of sharpness. Yeah, I'm not really impressed with that. We could also try surface blur, which in this case may work a little bit better. Keep the numbers down here. Maybe. That did smooth it out some, and then we could use Smart Sharpen to add some of the detail back in. We wouldn't want to get too carried away with it though. And then the last thing that we're going to do is come up to Image, Mode, Grayscale. Okay, and then I'm going to bring up Levels, Control L, and brighten up the image here a little bit. Add a little bit of the contrast back in. Click OK. Then we're going to convert it to a duotone, and I think we're going to try maybe like warm gray 8. That's a little too dark. You could experiment around with which color combination you like the best. Let's try this. That's a little too much. I like that. So we'll hit OK. And then I'm going to convert it back to RGB color. Okay. And the last thing we could do is perhaps just readjust the color again now, or the brightness a little bit, just because it's back to a color here. And then I'm going to choose Save As. And the original was TIFF, so I'm just going to leave it that way. But now that we have that, let's open up the original.